from the Department of Ethnic Studies at Palomar College, and he will present Unveiling the Connection Between the Mesoamerican Underworld and the Day of the Dead.
Well, thank you for having me, and this is a really cool topic because I'm sure a lot of you have seen motif of El Día de los Muertos, altares, which are altars, and so most of you are familiar with the Day of the Dead, and so I'm sure if I ask you what is it that you know about the Day of the Dead, you're going to tell me, oh, I know Mexican people, they wanted to remember their family members by building an altar, and so they believe that today, November 1st, which is it's celebrated for little kids, but tomorrow is really the big celebration of El Día de los Muertos. And so the tradition is that we believe, and I'm going to say we, that your family members come and they can meet you at that time. And so, but I'm going to explain a little bit more of how Mesoamericans view the Day of the Dead, because it's super complex. It has so many layers. And the way we celebrate it today is nothing like it was celebrated 3,000 years ago. So in 2008, the UNESCO proclaimed Mexico's Day of the Dead intangible cultural heritage of humanity. Huh. That word didn't come up there. So what we know about El Día de los Muertos in terms of the art is by a great lithographer. His name is Jose Guadalupe Posada, and he was the one who popularized the image of La Calavera, la Calaca. And so at that time, it was during Porfirio Diaz, and he was criticizing the aristocracy at that time. So this image of these women is really making fun of how the mestizo women was sort of dressing up the same way as the aristocracy. And so this image became very popular, and it's kind of like the main symbol of El Día de los Muertos. But Jose Guadalupe Posada, a great lithographer, and I think most of the art that we have today in Mexico, and not only Mexico, has gone beyond borders, is based on the art of Jose Guadalupe Posada. If you wanted to check him out, I mean, he's amazing. There was another person in Germany who came up with the same art, but it's so unique. And he made thousands of these cartoons because at that time, most of the population of Mexico didn't know how to write and read. And he thought that by doing cartoons with the skeletons, he would have like a better message. So, and then most of you saw this movie Coco, but there's been so many great films that has popularized El Día de los Muertos. And I'm using this because when Disney in 2017 released Coco, Coco went all over the world. I think the image of El Día de los Muertos became more widely known. So you can go to Europe, you can, here in the US, we all know sort of what El Día de los Muertos because of Coco. So, any of you saw this movie? Probably most of you, okay. All right, so we are celebrating Anthropology Day. So a lot of people think that Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, who was a friar, who was a Franciscan, became one of the first cultural anthropologists in Mexico and also Central America. So he's responsible for what we know about El Día de los Muertos in relation to the Aztec people, in relation to the Nahua people. So Fray Bernardino de Sahagún, he writes 12 books. And these monks were great because they were great at writing and doing research. And at one point, one of the missions of the church was actually learning about the cultures of the indigenous population of Mexico. And so Fray de Sahagún thought that was a great idea to learn about religion from the Aztecs. And the main purpose is how we can manipulate it, turn it, and try to convert these people into Catholicism. So he did a great job in recording most of the things about the Aztecs, and he wrote a book called Historia General de las Cosas de Nueva España. So it's general history of the things of New Spain. So New Spain is Mexico, because that's how Mexico was named as Nueva España. And so what we know about El Día de los Muertos from the Aztec is because of Fray Bernardino de Sahagún. But I think they were off. As a historian that I am, obviously they were trying to make sense of what the Aztec believed, and they were trying to turn that into more of from the European point of view. And so I think there was a lot of flaws, and I'm going to try to explain that as we go along with this. Though. So the roots of El Día de los Muertos, we can go back 3,000 years ago to the time of the Olmecs, the Zapotecs, then we go to the Mayas, Teotihuacanos, and then the last ones are the Aztecs. I kind of feel like the Aztecs were the copycats of all these cultures, because they were. The Aztec embraced most of this cosmology, religion from all these different cultures. Though. So the idea of El Día de los Muertos is really complex in the sense that Mesoamericans in general, and when I talk about Mesoamericans, I'm talking about a vast region that encompasses southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, parts of Nicaragua, Honduras, and a little bit of Costa Rica. So it's a huge, vast region. And a lot of this region was influenced by the Olmecs, then later the Mayans, the Teotihuacanos. And they have this idea that the world has been destroyed and also rebuilt. And so in this sense of thinking that life also goes on cycles. So they believe that the world was it's kind of like in a circular. And so I'm going to try to explain that in a little bit. For example, the Mayas, if we go back 2,000 years ago, they believe that the soul is bound to the body and birth. Only death or sickness can part the body and soul. But I wanted to explain this really well, because that's where Bernardino de Sahagún kind of made a mistake, because the friars, they used the concept of death, la muerte. But Mesoamerican people didn't have that word. So when they were trying to translate that from Nahuatl to Spanish, they had the concept of death, but the concept of death was he stopped. They used the word aparecer, so appear. So they stopped appearing. So their physical form stopped existing. It's not like they died. You don't see them anymore in this plane. People just move on to another world, if you have to put it that way. All right, so they all believe that we were connected to different worlds, above and below. And for most Mesoamericans, the way you die, it was so important. Not like the way you behave, because in Christianity we believe that if you behave well, then you're going to go to heaven. The Aztecs or Mesoamericans did not believe in it. They believed that you went to a world based on how you die. So that was kind of different than the concept of Christianity. And then I'm just giving you some important facts, and I'm going to get back to the concept of the cosmology. So yeah, the Nahua people, they honor the dead, which were traditionally held in August. It was celebrated for 18 days. And then later the Catholic Church moved it to coincide with El Día de Todos los Santos, the Day of All Saints. Once again, Catholics were trying to push and remove all those practices because they thought that the indigenous people were devil worshippers. So that's when the Roman Catholic Church adopted the celebration of El Día de Todos los Santos, and it's what we are celebrating today and tomorrow. All right. So yeah, the Aztecs have two celebrations. One for the muertitos, which is when little ones, they die, and then tomorrow is for the adults. And so that's something that Mexico is very unique in the sense of how they celebrate El Día de los Muertos, not only Mexico, but also parts of Guatemala, and they still, people go back and they clean their graveyards. And by the way, this is done from Mexico all the way down to South America, but the way Mexico does is a little bit different. The celebration of Mexico is more of a festivity than the ones done, let's say, in Colombia or Ecuador. But they do celebrate that. Not the same way, but they have a different concept. And when we talk about religious syncretism, which is the blending of the Catholic religion with the indigenous religion, is something that is really unique among all Mesoamerican people. So I think it's really beautiful that the Mexican people, without knowing, or even if they know, they're also embracing the indigenous legacy when they build an altar. So I'll explain that in a little bit. All right, so this is really important because I think this is what the Day of the Dead is all about. Mesoamericans believe, all of them, they believe that there were 13 heavens, but they're not really heavens. They're like these different worlds. 13 worlds above, and then you have 9 worlds below. The way the Dia de los Muertos is celebrated, because we are, like right now, if we go back in Aztec times, we're right here in the center. And then this is I guess we have to call it the world of the living, where we can see each other. But for you to see those who went away to a different world, you will have to build an altar. And so that altar means that these people will come from whatever world they were. For the Aztecs and for the Mexicanos, when someone died, you went to a world called Mictlan. And so I think that Fray Bernardino Sahagún got it right and wrong, because they equated Mictlan with the last world right here with kind of purgatory, kind of like hell, but it was not that way. And like I mentioned to you before, depending on how you die, you ended up going to one of these worlds. So if you were a woman who, let's say you died when you were giving birth, then you ended up going to one of these worlds above. And once again, every world had a god and a deity, and that's how a lot of these people ended up going to these different worlds. Well, for the Aztecs, they thought that it would take 4 years after you die. And once again, I hate using the word after you die. After you stop existing in this plane, you have 4 years to travel into the last destination that is called Mictlan. That's kind of like the end of the journey. That was actually for the Aztec. But El Día de los Muertos, which is in August, they thought that family members, think about like an open vortex will open up. And then you have an opportunity on August for, I'm going to be specific for the Nahua people, sort of being able to cross over into the vortex and be able to come back and visit your family members. So the idea of these altars back then for the Aztecs, it was only done for 4 years, because they believed that during these 4 years, the family who passed or went to a different world will come back every year to sort of regain energy, because the family will build an altar and will do ofrendas, which in Spanish means offerings. And the offerings were really, really important, and that's something that we still have today when we are building an altar. I don't know if we build an altar. It's at the library. I'm actually speaking tomorrow, similar to the same topic, but I'm here more to tell you or trying to explain the concept of death for Mesoamericans. So there's 2 words that Fray Bernardino de Sahagún kind of failed to translate. And one of them is nemi, which is the translation to Spanish means to leave, but it's not really to leave. It means to displace, to move. And the other word, kind of like Mickey Mouse, is Mickey means stop moving. It's like the absence of motion, which is really, really complex. And that's how they view death in that sense. So the Mickey word, which is muerte, which is not really muerte, it means that you stop moving. And I love this part of the explanation because Mesoamericans, they believe that we were always connected, where you stop breathing because then your brain or your conscious part can move on. This is so complex. I was actually reading from a guy who's an astrophysicist, and he think about quantum realm, and they thought that the concept of the Aztec with Mesoamericans in the sense of being connected, the mind with the universe, and being able to connect in a space when you're meditating, because you're not moving, allow these people to travel to these different worlds. It's super fascinating, though. So if you count the steps in here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, most of those pyramids in Mesoamerica, they represent the 9 layers to go to the underworld. And that's how a lot of the altars have the form of a pyramid. And so the top is that, if I go back a little bit, it can be the connections to the layers above or the layers below. This is in El Castillo. Any of you have been there? Great spot for spring breakers. All right. So, as I was explaining, the altares and ofrenda, for example, women who die in childbirth, they will become goddess, called Cihuateteo, portrayed with skeleton faces, as seen here, right here. And so that's why the skeleton motif are so important in Mesoamerican culture. Once again, Mesoamerican meaning all these nations that are part of Central America with the exception of Panama. All right. This part is awesome because most of the Mesoamericans, they talk about this, having a spirit that can be, how am I doing that? Sorry. That your spirit is broken down in 3 parts. So you have the tonali, which is your brain, the teolia was your heart, and then your liver. So if you go to some towns in Guatemala, people still keep their family members' skull because they think that's the only way for them to connect with them at the thoughts and ask for advices. And human sacrifices were done by removing the heart because they thought that blood was, think about like the gasoline, like powering the sun with energy. You know? So these 2 were super important in El Día de los Muertos because when family members go to the altar, so they visit the cemetery, they're going to be talking to the tonali, that part of the brain, Catherine, thank you, that really helps family members to connect with their loved ones. Okay, so this is what you see if you go to many parts of San Diego. We build altars, and then the only difference that Mexicanos have or Mesoamericans have with the rest of the Latin American people is the Sampasuchis, because the Sampasuchis are so powerful. They're native from Mexico, and they use the Sampasuchi sort of to represent also the sun, because they're very smelly. The family members, they think that the scent of it, they will know where the altar has been built. These altars are so sophisticated because it really represents nature, the world itself. It has all these elements, water because they think that the person who's traveling to all these worlds, when he finally arrives to the altar, he's really tired, so he needs water to drink. A lot of the altars have salt. Some of the altars you're going to see the image of a dog, because in the myth and mythology of the Aztecs, you have an important god that goes by the name of Quetzalcoatl. And he's the one who goes to the underworld to collect the bones and rebuild the world again. So he was a company of a dog, and according to the legend, the dog also helps the spirits to navigate through all these different worlds. How am I doing with time? I think it's... All right, 1 minute. So in closing, I mean, in 20 minutes, I'm trying to explain something that is so complex, but you sort of have now an idea of of what is the Dia de los Muertos for Mesoamerican people. And it's one of those days that I really love. And I have done so many research that I'm still learning as we try to decipher what Fray Bernardino Sahagún was trying to make sense of this. So that's all. Thank you.